Thanks to everyone who pre-ordered. I appreciate you. And as people join, just know that you can throw any questions in the Q&A, and I will get to as many cues as I can. Today, we're going to be making Culurgiones. If you haven't weighed out all your ingredients for the dough and measured out all the ingredients for the filling, please do so now. And look, I did put volumetric measurements in the dough recipe. Don't use those. Use a scale. And this is like $12 on Amazon. If you don't have a scale, get one. And you don't have to go to Amazon. Look, Bezos has enough cash. There are other sources, but weighing out flour in grams for dough of any kind will guarantee a more consistent product. And look, Culurgiones are a time-consuming labor of love. So don't you want to improve every time and have a consistent dough? Of course you do. So welcome to everybody. The candied orange peel, Ken, thanks for being here, enters in at the end. We're going to be making dough first. You've got to mix that dough, let it rest, and then we'll make the filling for the pasta. And then we'll roll out the dough. We will fill the Culurgiones with the pasta and pecorino dough, and then make the butter and sage condimento. Once the Culurgiones are cooked, you definitely want to, by the way, have your pasta water set on your stove, ready to boil. I mean, turn it on. Mine's already boiling. It's salted. And the candied orange peel will go in after the sage. Thanks, Becca. Appreciate you. And ciao, Teresa from Tampa. Cool. So let's get this party started. And again, anyone who's just getting here, if you've got cues, throw them in. Oh, Sally actually is asking a great question before we get started. How much salt in your pasta water? So I have this sort of taste cue. You bring your water to a boil, and once it's at a rolling boil, you add enough salt so that the water tastes like a seasoned soup, right? Some people say like salt it until it tastes like the sea. I've had, I go swimming in the ocean, that water's too salty. You want something that's less salty than that. But that tastes like it's seasoned. And these fresh pasta parcels are going to spend 4 to 5 minutes in the water. And during that time, they'll absorb some of that seasoning, but we're going to be seasoning throughout the process, right? Our filling is going to be salty, both from the addition of actual salt, as well as 2 types of cheese. And so that savoriness is going to impart some great flavor. Donna asks, can I freeze the Culurgiones before boiling? Actually, it's better to boil them, let them cool completely, and then freeze them. Fresh pasta, uncooked fresh pasta doesn't really thrive in the freezer, but cooked pasta does. And a little restaurant trick, a lot of places that make fresh pasta and serve it at restaurants will actually boil off the pasta in big batches at the beginning of the week, freeze it, and then defrost it for service. So sorry, Sally, I'm not giving you an exact proportion. I'm so like maniacally precise about dough proportions, but just like use your intuition. Va bene. Let's go. So I'm going to start out with 500 grams of semola rimacinata. So there's a difference between farina di semola rimacinata let's see if I can do this in a way that's not too awkward. That's awkward. Farina di semola rimacinata is durum wheat that has been milled more finely than semolina. Semolina is, I wouldn't call it ubiquitous because it's not as though it's present in every single supermarket, but it's more common to find that than farina di semola rimacinata. So imagine you've got the wheat berry of durum wheat, which is a hard wheat, grows all over South Italy, all over Sardinian Sicily. It's milled, and when it's still kind of grainy, that's when it's semolina. When it's milled more finely, not quite as powdery as all-purpose, but pretty close, that's farina di semola rimacinata. Because of the different size of the sort of flour powder, it absorbs water differently. If you have semolina, don't worry, just use that. It's fine. It's going to be all fine. And so I am going to mix 500 grams, which I've already weighed out with my handy scale. And then I'm going to add 250 grams of water. And I'm just literally just dumping it. I made a little well, not even that necessary, but kind of part of the pasta tradition. And I'm going to stir this up a little bit before adding the olive oil. And what olive oil is going to impart is a little bit of pliability. If you have worked with doughs before, especially doughs for egg-based pasta, this is a totally different animal. Your classic egg-based pasta uses soft wheat flour and often egg, whole egg or yolk. That is a different type of tradition. We're doing a Sardinian recipe today. Not everyone adds olive oil, but I think especially if you're new to the Culurgiones, doesn't hurt. And I just weighed this out. So this is going in. This is 5 grams. Cool. I like to start, whether I'm using eggs or water, I like to start in the bowl. And I just use a big spoon and mash everything together. And, you know, at first, this is going to look really dry and sandy. Don't fret. I mean, think about making dough and combining flour and water, almost like watering your garden. If you dump a bunch of water on your tomato plants, the water is going to run off. It's going to take time to absorb. Whereas if you slowly add it, or kind of just be patient and wait, the water will absorb. Using that analogy to describe the way that dough comes together. So we're going to see that as we work the dough, and I'm going to start in the bowl and then head over to my handy surface. It's my mom's kitchen, so Katie Parla's surface. So I'm just kind of getting in here, and I've got this clear bowl, and I'm mushing it, which is not the technical term. And I'm going to feel the dough. It's already hydrating, and I'm literally just using my fist, clenching it, and it's coming together. Once I don't have that many dried bits on the bowl, I'm just going to dump this. So if you haven't already gotten started, please join me. And I'm going to look at the Q&A just in case people have questions regarding this step. Can't wait to see you, Don Di Pasquale, at Razza tomorrow. Martin asks, what's a good source of fresh pecorino? I was thinking of using Asiago instead, but I like the idea of using the correct cheese. Depending on where you live, fresh pecorino or pecorino fresco might be available in your local supermarket or Italian specialty store. Sardinia, which is the most magnificent island of all the islands, yes, I'm biased, has a tremendous amount of pecorino production, fresh and aged. And a fun fact, 97% of pecorino romano is made in Sardinia. If you don't have fresh pecorino, use a cheese that melts well. The filling is going to be a mixture of potato, mint, a little garlic, salt, an aged pecorino, and a soft pecorino. So if you got to sub the soft pecorino with something else that melts, do you? Sherry Lucas, don't worry about the candied orange peel. I'm actually not going to use it myself because I'm making these for my nephews and they love a butter sage sauce, but they're not really down with the candied orange peel. That would go in the butter and sage mixture. I see some repeat questions that I'll circle back to. Okay. Ooh. So normally I'm cooking in my kitchen and Joanne's got a light fixture above her marble table. So hopefully I'm not going to smack my head into that again. Okay. So even like in the 90 seconds I was paused, the dough has started to absorb the liquid. So I'm just going to empty this out onto my work surface. Cool. All right, and now I'm just going to knead this together. You may or may not want to wear an oversized wool sweater while doing this. Probably not, but that's my move today. Okay, so I've got all of this like loose flour and I'm just mashing it. And I'll adjust the screen so that it's a little bit more visible to you. Here we go. So like you would need a fresh pasta dough made from soft wheat and egg, just sort of crushing it against the surface. If you've ever been to Sardinia or made pasta with people from Sardinia, they're pretty aggressive with their kneading. And rather than just sort of kneading in a compact mass, they'll actually rip the dough. And that's fine because we're not even at a stage where the gluten is properly formed. And so we're not doing any damage. So a few words about Sardinia. I hope that you all are planning a trip. If not, and you need a little bit more inspo, in the back of the book, there's a resources section, and that's got a QR code that has all the recommendations for this wonderful island. And Sardinia is the second largest island in the Mediterranean. It is wild and rural. The main cities are Cagliari, Alghero, Olbia, Oristano, but there are lots and lots of grazing lands and so many sheep, in fact, more sheep than people. And it's a major agricultural place in Italy. Obviously, if you're on the gram, you know it's also a beach destination. And it's got a really long coastline. And most people stick to the northeastern part of the island, the so-called Costa Smeralda, which undoubtedly has beautiful beaches and lovely water. But most of the time that I spent researching this book was dedicated instead to the interior, which is where most people live and where Sardinian culture mainly developed. And if you've had an opportunity to read the book, or at least leaf through the recipes, you may have noticed it's not all fish. In fact, a lot of the foods in Sardinia and the other islands is decidedly land-based. And that's because people developed their cultures where they could grow and raise produce and animals that could sustain them. And I always make the joke that, there were literal pirates in the sea that were threatening seaside settlements. That's true. There was also a lot of invasion, but also the sea is unpredictable, unstable, and at times a very difficult place to base your society. So durum wheat, pecorino, potatoes, mint, garlic, olive oil, the ingredients in this recipe are a showcase of Sardinian food culture in a greater way than most fresh fish dishes would be. Sam is asking, would a canonau be too heavy to serve with this? Canonau, which is also known as grenache in other locales, expresses itself differently depending on where it grows. And there are so many producers. Some of them are looking to express that grape in a way that's elegant subtle, whereas others are making it in a way that's supposed to be bold, alcohol heavy, fruit forward, in order to sort of satisfy the needs of an international palate. But you could certainly serve a lighter canunao with a little chill on it. My favorite thing to drink with Culurgiones, however, is Dettori Bianco. Dettori is a producer in Senori, the northern part of Sardinia, and Senori is just near the coastline. So I'm going to write Dettori Bianco in the chat. Dettori is the producer, and Dettori Bianco is their white wine. It's a wine made of a blend of grapes. Dettori exports all over the US, although they don't produce that much wine. It's not like Sale Mosca, which is an enormous producer making hundreds of thousands of bottles, but Dettori is present everywhere, and they have Renoso Bianco and all this like top of the line, very expensive white wine, which is age-worthy. And the more sort of affordable one is the entry level Bianco. So I see a hand raised. So great, Jeanette. If your dough's not coming together yet, keep working. Lean into it. Throw some elbow grease in there. And a lot of the dough recipes in the book are on the lower side, hydration-wise. What that means is there's the proportion of the relationship between the flour and water. Let's say you have 500 grams of flour, as we do, and 250 grams of water. That's a 50% hydration. When you're making an egg-based pasta, like in the Bolognese style, that might be 62% or 58%, so higher. Jeanette, if your dough is not coming together, it's possible. Well, first of all, did you weigh it or did you measure it? If it's, a couple minutes of really working and it's still super dry, I would add literally 5 grams of water. If you weighed it and it's not coming together as mine is, I'm just like leaning a lot of book tour weight into it. So just keep working. Okay, Jeanette weighed it. Keep working. I mean, dough changes visibly over the course of even just a few minutes. So again, in like the few minutes that I just paused, this is now taken on a totally different texture. I see no dry flour bits, and it's for sure a little grainy. It's not smooth and supple yet, but semolina and farina di semola rimacinata takes time to absorb the water. So that's what's happening. All right. So a word on extensibility. Durum wheat, by nature, as it develops gluten, which is mainly 2 proteins, glutenin and gliadin, those have characteristics that either allow the dough to like stretch and snap back, so elasticity, or the ability to be stretched and hold its shape. That's extensibility. Durum wheat's not super extensible. So when you're kneading durum wheat and it's just like kind of compact and looks a little bit like this, that's just the expression of the proteins. Okay, I'm going to knead a little bit more, and then I'm going to roll this, rather form it into a ball, set it aside in plastic wrap. So if anyone's getting here a little bit late, put a pot of water on the stove to boil. After we make the culurgiones, we're going to cook them off and then put them in some butter and sage sauce. So this has already changed consistency again. It's gotten more smooth. So a little more work before you put it to bed. And what that waiting phase does is it allows the flour to continue to hydrate. Okay. Working up a sweat in here. Okay. We're good. There are a couple of schools of thought. Knead the dough for 30 minutes or knead it for a short time and allow that strength, the gluten, to develop with a little bit of time. So I'm going to put my dough, which is not super smooth, but it'll become very smooth when it's resting. I'm going to put this in some plastic wrap. And you want the plastic wrap, that is an entirely too small piece. You want the plastic wrap to be totally closed. So you want to roll it up real tight. And that way it won't lose any moisture and develop a funky crust on the outside. There we go. Now it's ready to rest. And we're just going to set this aside. Let's get to some more questions. How do we store extra dough? Does it freeze well? Can the filling be frozen? You can freeze the dough, but oddly, it doesn't perform well once shaped. And just let it come to complete room temperature when you defrost it. And then you can shape it. Whereas if you're shaping the Culurgiones today, and you want to eat them, I think someone said in 6 hours, I would just wrap them really tightly on a baking sheet with a little bit of semolina or farina di semola to keep them from sticking, and then cover them with a small dusting, and then put plastic wrap on top. That way the plastic wrap won't stick, as when you cover it, it'll create some condensation. The filling for sure can be frozen. Okay. Donna Spencer, great question. I'm using semola, but can use tipo doppio zero. 00 flour generally denotes flour that is mainly soft wheat. Sometimes there is some durum wheat inside, but I can't think of a single example in which a company tells you exactly what the proportions are. Instead, they'll tell you what the characteristics are with additional terminology. 00 in Italian flour terms just means super finely milled, highly refined flour. They get rid of all the bran and germ. A wheat berry has 3 main components: bran, germ, and endosperm. And so 00 flour is basically like 100% endosperm. So the fiber and nutritional elements are sifted out. And when you go to an Italian grocery store or an Italian specialty store outside of Italy, you'll see doppio zero, 00, but then there'll be the terminology that tells you what it's good for. So it'll say pasticceria, so for pastry. And that means it probably doesn't have any durum wheat in it at all, which would give more strength than you need for flaky pastry. Whereas if you see 00, per la pizza e il pane, then it probably has some durum wheat in it to give that additional strength. Strength is something that you can deduce yourself by looking at the nutritional information. So look at the back of your flour package, and if it says for every 100 grams of flour, there are 9 grams of protein, do not use that for pasta. That is for pastry. That, from a flour standpoint, is a very low amount of protein. All-purpose kind of weighs in at like 11 to 13, but a tipo doppio zero that's adapted for bread and pastries could be 13, 14, sometimes 12, but it has more protein, therefore more strength potential. The protein is related to the gluten, which is the proteic element. Thanks for that. Ciao, Tracy, in Venice, California. I was in your fine city 8 hours ago. Now I'm in New Jersey. Oh, Nicole asks, will you do one of the Italian islands class to partner? Not ruling that out. That's a great idea. And then Jeanette asked perhaps the most important question of all. Do you like Ischia? No, I love Ischia. It's amazing. If you want to do like channel an Ischia vibe, the famous rabbit, braised rabbit from Ischia recipes in the book, and then so is rucolino, which is basically you macerate arugula in Everclear or the grain spirit of your choice. And then after a period, you add syrup, water, and sugar to dilute the alcohol content. Okay, Kit. Excellent question. I'm using whole wheat flour, red einkorn. So whole wheat flour could be 100% of the wheat berry, all the endosperm, all the bran and germ, or it could be a lower percentage. Bran is, I guess, sharp is the good word to use for it. And when you make dough, it slices the gluten. And so I tend to recommend when using red einkorn or another whole wheat flour to use it in a small percentage rather than 100%, because it's going to affect the texture and the usability of your dough, whether that's pasta dough or bread dough. So I'd love to know what your results are, but I would presume that it's going to be very difficult to roll out the dough and have a compact enough pasta to contain the filling, but do let us know. Seabat asks, is it possible to over-knead the dough? For our purposes, like we're not making a tender crumbed pizza crust or an ethereal bread. So you really have to go crazy hard to over-knead the dough. When you're kneading durum wheat, in order to create sufilindeu, so if you haven't seen that pasta, it is in the appendix section of the book. That pasta dough is kneaded for like an hour, and it takes either all at one time or in stages, takes so long for durum wheat to be kind of stressed, the gluten to be stressed enough so that it's over kneaded, so that instead of being just like a little springy, it just like breaks apart. So you can over knead it, but you'll know, like you'll be at it and sweating in your kitchen for 45 minutes before you even get anywhere close. Suzanne Massa says, can I cover the bowl with the board? Sure, as long as you're not in too dry of a climate. Hey, Danielle in DC. Before plastic wrap, people would cover things with wet towels, damp towels, or just dry towels. Sally has the same question. Antoine asks, what part of New Jersey are you from? Princeton, New Jersey. And Tina is in South Jersey. What up? Cool. So this guy's going on the side. I'm going to make the filling and then we will get back to your questions. All righty. Now, per the class instructions, I mentioned that everyone should prep the ingredients based on the ingredients list. So in theory, you all have cooked your potatoes and peeled and riced them. If not, I would get started with that an hour and a half ago. Just kidding. You can catch up with us. I've got my potatoes here. And to the potatoes, which I've mashed with a masher, which I managed to wrangle from my nephew, who was very intrigued by it. To this, I'm going to add a little bit of whole milk. A couple tablespoons. And then some fresh pecorino. I said cube it in the recipe. I just didn't want to have a knife out with small children around, and so I just grated it with a box grater. And then I grated also the pecorino sardo. So we've got 1.5 cups of each. Next, a couple of tablespoons of mint. Shout out to my mom for mincing that for me. And then a little bit of garlic, which I've misplaced. Perfect. Nope, there she is. I don't love a lot of garlic. So in the recipe, it's a 1/2 clove, but I use this whole small clove. And then we're doing a little olive oil. I'm going to throw in sea salt. And then we're going to adjust for seasoning. So to repeat, we've got a pound of potatoes, 2 tablespoons of whole milk, half a cup each of a pecorino sardo, pecorino romano, half a cup of fresh pecorino, 2 tablespoons of finely chopped mint, half a clove of minced garlic or 1 small clove, 2 tablespoons of olive oil. And well, it's important to clean your work surface. So moving these things out of the way, then I'm just going to mix it up. It's absolutely useless to do this with a fork. I'm using my hands. Very therapeutic. In Sardinia, there are as many Culurgiones fillings as there are Culurgiones cooks. And this is a pasta that used to be a regional specialty, but now you can find it all over the island. You can even find it in the freezer section of the supermarket. And it's pretty ubiquitous. It's one of the many products that has transcended its original location because it's become so iconic that people all over the island make it. And so I've just kind of mashed this together and then taste it. That needs a lot more salt. Okay. So this is done. And I'm pretty sure that you can't over knead this. So I'm now going to wash my hands. BRB. Thanks for your patience. So just set this aside. Clean your work surface. My mom has kind of a fancy dough scraper. They sell them at kitchen stores, plastic ones for $2. That's $2 you'll ever spend on kitchen equipment. So we'll answer some questions, and then once the pasta dough is rested a bit, I'm going to roll it out and start filling the Culurgiones. Hannah, enjoy your time in Sardinia this summer. Another reminder that in the book, there's a resources section with a QR code. You scan that and you got all my tips. I highly recommend renting a car and having multiple bases in Sardinia. It's a huge island and it really deserves like a paced road trip type of vibe. Tina's asking if these will keep uncooked in the fridge to serve tomorrow. I would par cook them today, honestly, and then let them cool off completely, then put them in the fridge and then finish cooking them tomorrow, like cook 3/4 of the way. Teresa again asks, during your research in Sardinia, what did you observe about the diet lifestyle of Sardinians living in the Blue Zone? A Blue Zone is an area that has, this might not be the actual technical definition, but the Blue Zones are places where people have incredible longevity. And I went to this incredible place, Sumanali, which is it's a farm that raises heritage breeds of pigs, the razza sarda, and then they transform the pigs into prosciutto and salamis and all sorts of things. And it's done in a way that kind of mirrors the style of Iberian ham. No surprise, Spain was under Spanish dominion for hundreds of years. And so it's logical that there would be some culinary influence there. So in this village, in the Barbagia, which is a very large sub-region, people live well into their 100s, 110s. And many of these villages that are part of the sort of Blue Zone will have portraits of these people in their old age displayed throughout the town. The diet in villages in rural zones of Sardinia, of course, has nuances and differences from place to place, but generally speaking, it's a very omnivorous diet. There is no shortage of pork fat. Lard, strutto, is incorporated into breads, sometimes even pastas, certainly sweets. People eat a lot of dairy. They also eat tons of legumes. so much bread and a tremendous amount of fresh vegetables. They drink a lot of wine and filu which is similar to grappa. And so people consume a huge variety of things, but they are incredibly active. From childhood, people work in agricultural jobs, and the terrain is not necessarily ideal for mechanized harvesting. So people are moving around a lot. So food tends to be, absent of additives and preservatives, and the food's, natural, even though that's a loaded word. But it's a combination of eating a variety of things and moving your body. The cultural significance of Culurgiones. Well, if you've seen the photo of them, you might have noticed that the closure, the seam that we're going to pinch closed, looks a lot like an ear of grain. And so this is a festive pasta. It's a labor-intensive one, and in Sardinia, people devote a lot of time to pastas that are celebratory and devoted to particular religious festivals. And grain is something that is highly revered in Sardinia. So pastas are intricately formed. Breads are incredibly ornate. And this reverence for grain, kind of combined with the religious cultural traditions and rituals, is a true Sardinian feature. The book has a feature on decorative breads of Sardinia, and you'll see one artisan in particular, Gianfranco Dettori, who's not related, oddly, to the Dettori wine people, but is from the same town. It's a common last name. She makes these ornate historical breads. Villages all over the island would make breads in certain shapes with different ornamentation in order to celebrate saints. And so there's this deep religious devotion connected to grain, and it's expressed in pasta and in bread. Ken Rogers asks, what type of potatoes are you using? I'm using russets. So Michele asks, you mentioned you went to Italy and wanted to live there. Was that after you went to college? I graduated in 2002, but in 1996, when I was still in high school, I decided I wanted to move to Italy. So I focused my later teens on that endeavor. And after I graduated with a degree in art history, I moved to Italy, and that was over 20 years ago. And so, when you graduate, just figured people would be handing me a job left and right. That actually didn't turn out the way I expected. And so I had to figure out what to do. I was very attracted to food. I always worked in front of house positions. My dad had a restaurant until not a couple of months ago, maybe 6 months ago, in New Brunswick, New Jersey. Clyde's, shout out. And so I took a sommelier certification course and then did a master's in Italian gastronomic culture, because I was always naturally gravitating towards food, but in order to have any authority to talk about it, I still really believe that you have to have some academic credentials to back that up. So Kelsey asks, we're going to Taormina, Cagliari, and Ischia this summer. Can you give us your top restaurants, please? So I wrote a eater list about Sardinia, where you'll find all my picks, including many in Cagliari. And then in Taormina, there's a place called Divino Rosso. I would suggest, if possible, that you do most of your eating outside of Taormina. Taormina, like the Amalfi Coast, was developed for Anglophone and German-speaking Danish, basically wealthy European and American tourists, North American tourists, a century and a half ago. And so the food culture and just the whole experience is less Sicilian than you might think. So do, if possible, make some time for Mount Etna, go to Catania. But regardless, for all of these places, I might as well dig up this QR code because I keep talking about it. The cookbook. There she is. The cookbook has a resources section. So it's page 249. And that QR code right there will whisk you away to all the Parla pics. And I'll keep updating that. Okay. Sam asked, are there any driving tips for getting around Sardinia? Number one tip, get full insurance coverage. Do not add it when you book on Expedia or whatever your preferred portal is. Book the car, and then when you get to the desk, ask for full coverage. So when you book on Expedia, you're not getting the full coverage. You're getting like most coverage, and you really want to have a consequence-free experience, trust me. The island is spectacularly beautiful. There are several highways, but not as developed as some other parts of Italy. So sometimes you've got to go like north to go south, kind of. So I would have plenty of time, definitely budget plenty of time. And then, yeah, by the way, I see it's 12:41. We might go a little over the hour mark. Can I use a pastry mat to roll out the pasta or will it dry out the dough? I'm not sure what a pastry mat is. Is that like a silicone thing? Heather Grimm asks, how would you recommend defrosting them after freezing? I would just take them out, uncover them, leave them out at room temperature. And then when they're mostly thawed, you boil them off. Will I be doing more episodes for recipe.tv? Theoretically, we're filming new shows in June. Okay. So Danielle's calling out the donate section of the cookbook, which is on the same page as the resources. And that acknowledges that while the islands are the pleasant playgrounds of many, they all are also a place where many people enter Italy from other parts of the world as refugees and migrants, and many don't survive. So I would, this is kind of a theme that covers my work, podcast, writing, all of this. Italy is a beautiful, spectacular place in a lot of ways, but it's also complex. And I think it's fair to confront all the realities of a place rather than just promoting the beautiful beachy splendor. Okay. So Donna, I look forward to seeing you in September too for our tours. And yes, my assistant Maria is pure magic. Okay. Clearing these. We're doing great in the Q&A section, guys. Drop any more cues that you've got. I think I've gotten to most of them. So Elaine, if you wanted to serve them 4 to 5 hours from now, I think I might have already answered this. Cover them. Know that there's going to be some condensation that creates some maybe loose covering, and then you can boil them off in 4 to 5 hours. I realize some of you are doing this at like 9 in the morning. Alrighty. Okay, I'm going to start rolling this dough. So here we go. Another handy use of the dough scraper is cutting dough. Okay, so I'm just kind of like making a ball. And I might or might not want some flour on this. I did have a little bowl of flour and then my nephew proceeded to take a bath in it. So we'll see how this works. All right, so I'm not rolling out all the dough at once. Yeah, this is sticking. I'm gonna get some flour. For this, I would actually use a powdery flour rather than semolina, or if you've got semola rimacinata, use that. Something that's powdery and fine. And it's like not a full circle. We're working on it. We're working on shapes here. And I've got the rolling pin in the center of the dough. And I went from basically keeping it at 3 and 9 o'clock, rolling up to 12. Now doing 3 ways. And now I'm going to bring it towards me, down towards 6 o'clock, 5, 4. And if this isn't stretching out for you, that is the durum wheat at work. It doesn't want to stretch. It wants to stay in its form. And that's the absence of extensibility. So still pretty thick. You just kind of want to start in the middle. You don't want to be going from top to bottom, but using this as kind of like your center point. And never in the history of pasta have I ever made a circle properly, in spite of my best efforts. Okay, so this is super smooth. If you're using whole wheat, you will see a lot of bran and germ, and you might have some difficulty rolling it out. Let us know how it's going over there. Shout out to the source of that grain at the West Windsor Farmers Market, my hometown farmers market. Okay, it's a little thick here. Now, I don't want this to be like paper thin. We're not going for like the tortellini and brodo, because it does have to contain that lovely seasoned potato filling. Okay. But there's this kind of like tradition in Emilia, which is the fresh pasta capital of Italy, that pasta is no good unless you can read a newspaper through it. But we're not in Emilia right now, we're in Sardinia. Okay, so it takes a little bit of work to get this durum wheat to be extensible, but it's happening. All right, so pretty thin. Couldn't read a newspaper through it, that's okay. And then I'm gonna cut the dough with this super technical tool, one of my mom's bowls. And I would say this is like 2.5. Maybe this is a little larger than I really want, but one of the themes of the book is you do what you can with what you got. And when you set your discs aside, you want to make sure that they're not overlapping each other, because they'll stick together. Oops. A cookie cutter also, a juice glass. I thought about using my Wave Murano glass, Food of the Italian Islands glassware, but this is a little bit too big. Okay. This will be a great time to sort of tidy up your work surface. And now it's time to fill. So I'm going to trying to figure out what size this is. 1.5 walnuts. Let's say 1.5 walnuts. Couple tablespoons. And let's see if I can position myself so that, okay. So I'm kind of making a W. And I've got this, I mean, this is too much potato for this Culurgione, but we want it to be pretty filled. And therefore, I'm going to pinch it closed along this seam, and some's going to pop out the back. That's actually quite normal. And now as I pinch and fold, and I'm folding over from one side. Oh, I'm doing a terrible job showing you what I'm doing. Folding from one side to the other, one side to the other, one side to the other. I'm going to do this a couple more times. Oh, there she went. Okay. And you see this little part at the bottom? Really want to squeeze that closed, because otherwise your potato will fall at the bottom. Shall we see that again? Couple tablespoons on here. And oh, pro tip, make sure your hands are dry. I got a kitchen towel over here, and I clean my fingers before hitting this again, because I don't want the pasta to stick to my fingers. I want the pasta to stick to the pasta. So you make a W, and then you pinch, pinch, oops, pinch, 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 and you're pinching and folding really. I need an overhead camera, guys. Classy. And this is that ear of grain, symbolized by the closure. Okay, let's do another one. I'll see if there are any cues. And then I'll do another. Claire, you absolutely can knead your dough in a KitchenAid mixer. I wrote a book called American Solino for Evan Funky, and pardon my French. Well, I just won't say the F word, but his motto was F your pasta machine. I don't believe in that. I think use whatever tools you need in order to make this something that you're going to actually cook. If everyone is just like obliged to use old school tools, which do contribute to or exacerbate arthritis and other ailments, that's kind of toxic. So do what you need to do. Lisa, I will come to Boston in the fall as part of the book tour. Haven't identified exactly when, but so Suzanne, the amount of pieces that you get out of this dough is going to depend on how thin you roll it. So I think like 50-ish, maybe a bit more than that. But I might be misspeaking. It's going to depend on how thin your dough is, though. The KitchenAid pasta attachment. Oh, we've got a visitor. Hey, Ryder. Do you want some potato?
Oh, yeah.
Here.
I know.
Oh, no? Okay, cool. Tina asked if we use a pasta machine, what setting do we go down to? I'd say maybe second thinnest. Shout out to Jeanette's husband, who also fails to make circles with dough like me. So Mary asks, is there a difference in texture if you use a pasta machine versus hand rolling? If you have the 7 settings, I go down to the second thinnest. A pasta machine is more consistent because it's calibrated to a specific thickness, whereas your hands and your body, unless you have like supreme intuition and a lot of experience, having a universally thin dough is challenging. Donna, third setting's okay too. 2 or 3. Okay, so Ken says he used a quarter amount of the flour, water, etc., and he made 9 good circles and 1 almost good. So 10 times 4, 40 for the thickness that he rolled. So it looks like it's called an ear of wheat, an ear of corn. And I will show the process again. And yes, I absolutely will show this again. Lisa, shout out to you. Definitely recruit a team when it comes to closing Culurgiones. 3-year-olds have tiny fingers that are, when trained, great for making closures. And Danielle, if yours don't look like mine yet, I've done this approximately 800 times. So that's all right. You'll get it. And by the way, I'm recording this. So I'm going to try to make it very visible to the camera for the third closure. But I also have a QR code on page 245 that shows 2 different people pinching the dough closed. Tina, I'm sure yours do not look scary at all. This is just a process. Dawn, gyoza and mezzaluna ravioli, 2 of the most delicious things on earth. So you're good. Okay. All right. We'll use some of the potato that my nephew did not want. And a little more maybe. Okay. So let's see if I can do this while looking at the camera to make sure that I'm doing it right. Fold it over, pinch, fold it over, pinch, fold it over, pinch, fold it over. Let's get rid of this so you can see better. Pinch, fold it over. Oh, this is hard to do while not looking. Pinch, fold it over, pinch, fold it over, pinch, fold it over. Get out of there. Pinch, fold it over, pinch, fold it over. Pinch, fold it over, pinch, fold it over. And then pinch it closed. Do not recommend pinching these closed while not looking. Or while watching yourself do it on a camera. A little challenging. But now we've got Culurgiones, 3 of them. So let's go over to the stove, shall we? Hey guys. I've got water boiling. And I'm just putting 3. I would definitely make more if you're hungry. But for our purposes, we're doing 3. And depending on how thick your closure is and how thick the pasta is, this could take 4 minutes, 5, even 6 minutes. In the meantime, I've got some butter in here. And I'm going to melt this butter. Don't melt the butter, Ryder. I've got to melt the butter. I think you'll agree when you taste it. Okay. Also, Culurgiones, they're not the most delicate pasta in the land, but I would recommend, gently putting them in your boiling water and then using a spider rather than dumping them into a colander. And I'm going to use the spider to transfer them to the butter. All right. Well, that's melting and the pasta's cooking. Let's get to some more questions. The combo of all-purpose flour Plus whole wheat flour seems to be working well. Some roughness to the dough, but pliable. Great. Don't tell any Sardinians you used all-purpose. Just say that you used stone milled rimachinata. So Martin asks, what made you interested in publishing your own book? Food of the Italian Islands is my 7th cookbook, and I work really hard on books. I research them for years. And when you have a contract with a large publisher, there are many expenses that are on you. The photography I have to pay for, the testing, the development, all the research. And so your advance, which you get in parts, usually spaced out over 2 or more years, vanishes really quickly, and you end up spending money in order to promote the book. And so I've never made money writing cookbooks, even though I have pretty good sales. So that, and like a desire to experiment with new forms, like wanting to have creative control, all kind of coalesced. And I got to make this thing in Italy, in Brescia, which is so cool. I got to watch the whole process happen. When you write a cookbook, generally once the text is edited and all the photography is laid out, like you send the file away and then you don't get to be part of any other element of the process. It gets printed, it gets, shipped to a warehouse. You don't see any of that happen. And I got to see everything happen. Hello, Ryder. Please don't hang up on these wonderful, wonderful people.
What's that button?
That button, not important. So throughout the past 10 days or so that the book's been out, I've done a ton of interviews, podcasts, television appearances in which I've talked about independent publishing. And what's very cool is that in addition to producing my own work, I'm also helping others do the same. And so I'm working on the Angelini Osteria cookbook. They're based in LA, and I'm writing, producing, and publishing the book. Thanks for that question. Oh, Kit, this is the hardest question ever to answer. What is my favorite recipe from the book? I love the pistachio pesto a lot. I love, okay. Ryder. just don't mash anything and you're fine. I love the caponata. My version has almonds in it. I'm really into the Culurgiones, honestly. Like I'm 3/4 Italian and 1/4 Polish. So this really speaks to my pierogi love. Okay, so I've got the butter's kind of foaming. I don't want it to burn, so I'm taking it off the heat and I'm just adding the sage. Ooh, turns out I burned it a little tiny bit, not that much. Okay, no, it's not burned. So I'm turning off the heat. At this point, I would also add candied orange zest if using, and that combination of butter and sage is something you'll find more commonly. This is served with tomato sauce, but there's this place in Nuoro called Il Rifugio. If you read my eater list or my resources suggestions, you'll see Il Rifugio. Can I have like just five more minutes for the, sorry, buddy. I love you very much. And so they serve their Culurgiones with butter, sage, and candied orange zest. All right. Guys, this is smelling great. So Anonymous asks, can I save the pasta dough in plastic wrap and roll out the rest in 6 hours? Yes, if you're not using whole wheat. I've used whole wheat in my dough before, not for this pasta, but for another. And it's so, like, especially if it's fresh stone milled whole wheat, it like starts to ferment right away. Like you're making it basically a sourdough. And so you don't want to do that. But if it's, a refined flour like rimachinata or all purpose or bread flour, you can do that. You might, if it's hot in your kitchen, you might just want to like throw it in the fridge, but take it out a couple hours before you plan to roll it. Jeanette, yours don't look like ugly blobs. They're precious, precious blobs. What's up, Tom? Tom, I don't have my cell phone with me right now, but you'll be delighted to know that the buffalo sticker that you gave me at Totondo and Buffalo is proudly displayed on my cell phone. Valerie, you can freeze the dough. The filling can be frozen. So I know it's a commitment to make like 50 or 60 Culurgiones, and you don't have to do it all at once. You can prep the dough, prep the filling, freeze it separately, and then roll out the thawed dough when you're ready. And then you want the filling to come to room temperature before using. Okay. So I literally did not do anything particularly interesting, but I'll re-show. I just took the pasta and I'm putting it, oh, I shouldn't have blopped it like that. That was not smart, Parla. And because I brought over a little bit of water, I want to burn that off while gently swirling my Culurgiones. This is definitely not my stove. Just a pro tip when you're doing a cooking class, it's best to use all the tools and spaces that you're most familiar with.
Hey, Katie.
What's up, Ryder? So we've got our Culurgione. Turn this off so I don't start a fire. There she is. Little Culurgione, so cute. Final touch, little pecorino. Let's try it out. Or in other words, how to burn your mouth in front of a crowd. Oh my God. Most people in Sardinia don't use this much fresh cheese. My recipe is based on that of Ovile Bertarelli, also in the Eater Guide. They use a lot of the soft cheese, so it's like melty and delicious. I'm obsessed with this. I encourage you to make the filling your own. Even that 1 clove of garlic and all that potato, 1 small clove, really present. So you can modify it. If you want more garlic, go for it. If you want more mint, do that. You can really personalize it. So there you go. Food of the Italian Islands recipe, Culurgiones. If you've got more questions, hit me. Oh, Danielle's team garlic. Interesting. I approve. I said, make it your own. Do you? Valerie said I use the same pecorino for grated and cubed. I like a melty, cheesy filling, but you certainly can modify. So, if you did not master the pinch and fold, on page 245, there is a QR code that will take you to a video demo of 2 different people making Culurgiones. So you will be able to master this. Takes a little bit of time, but remember, you start with the bottom with a sort of W formation, and then you pinch and fold back and forth.
I just book you.
That's better. Okay, perfect. Yeah, like that. Nice. Thank you. So let's see. I'm going to actually show you the QR code so you know what I'm talking about. 245. There are also process shots. But just know that no one masters Culurgiones. Not true. Some people are just very, very good at watching something and reproducing those movements. But practice makes perfect. Sherry Lucas, buon appetito. Is it okay to make them larger? Sure. Why not? And actually, I did an event in LA 2 days ago at Capri Club where the chef, Francesco Allegro, made really tiny ones. He probably did an 1.5 inch disc rather than 2 or 2.5. And they were adorable. But he's also like, he's been making pasta since he's like 9 months old. So he's a wizard. Claire asks, can you use black garlic? I don't really know how to use black garlic, but if you do and you think it would taste good, see. Is Ryder going to help make the rest? If by help make the rest, you mean mash every single one that I make, then absolutely. See you at Ratza, Andrew. Can't wait. Got my Sharpies fired up. Oh, great. Sherry, ground pepper. That was kind of a key ingredient. Sometimes when you're cooking, you forget to add something. So I'll do it right now. Boom, done. Huh, that's fantastic. Susanna asked a really good question. Suzanne, sorry, asked a really good question. Can I use this for longer cuts of pasta? Yes. You can use it for the buziate as well. And that's a different recipe, but you could still get away with it. Just know that the lack of extensibility in durum wheat dough means that you're not going to be making long, kind of elastic tagliatelle, just because it's a different flour. It's a different set of characteristics. You could also make, if you have my other book, the long fusilli, the sort of enclosed fusilli from Food of the Italian Islands. Also, guys, no one is obligated to stick around any longer because we've reached the end of our hour. However, I want to show you a couple more. Oops. Oh, someone dumped milk over here. I wonder who that was. Here we go. I want to show you a couple more shapes. A little bonus content over here. Bonus content. This is, guys, you're actually going to laugh. These are macarones di podige. Done. And these are served with tiny meatballs. Then. Looks like little pea pods. 3-finger cavatelli. I just am basically making a worm. 4-finger cavatelli. Still looks like pea pods. Might want to serve that with guanciale and peas. And then, of course, you can make all sorts of orecchiette and smaller cavatelli like this. So thanks for being here. I'm just going to go through the rest of the Q&A to see if I mixed something. Caitlin, do they float when ready? They should, depends on how full they are, honestly. I would taste one, and if the seam is fully cooked and doesn't have a raw flour flavor, then you're done. Blob's cooked and yummy. Love to hear it. Martin, they were, oh, hey, Martin, that Martin, what's up? They were so good at Capri Club. See you at Razza tomorrow. Antoine, you tell when they're properly cooked by tasting. And for this type of pasta, you just try one, see if it's cooked at the seam. You don't want the raw flour flavor to come through. Awesome, Tina, glad to hear it. So Mary's going to Genoa, Turin, and Lake Como this summer, planning Sardinia next year. I have a Turin guide on my site, katieparla.com. So if you wanted to add the candied orange zest, you would do that after the sage is sort of like infused in the, or you could do it even with the sage, as long as the butter's not too hot. So how would these keep for tomorrow? I guess you could do it in the fridge, yeah. I would boil them off like 3/4 of the way, let them cool completely, and then set them aside in the fridge. Buon appetito. Grazie a voi. Suzanne, you can keep them in the fridge until later. Just make sure that they're stored in a way that doesn't cause them to stick. Elaine, pinching and folding pasta in your sleep is the dream, like literally and figuratively. So another question about storing them, cover them, know that there's going to be some condensation, make sure that they're stored in a way that does not stick. Dawn, see you tomorrow. A good source for fresh pecorino. Oh, we've covered that one. Apologies. I think we're good. Arrivederci. Ciao. Thanks for coming.